To understand the modern war for gold, you have to go back to the year 1913, a moment in American history that most people never think about, yet it quietly changed the entire global financial system. Before 1913, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold, controlled by Congress, and tied directly to the physical wealth of the nation. But powerful banking families believed this system limited their influence and profits. They wanted something different, control of money without the limitations of gold. So, in December 1913, during the holiday season when most lawmakers had already gone home, Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act. It created the Federal Reserve, a central bank that was technically public, but effectively run by a network of private bankers. Overnight, the power to create money, set interest rates, and control the nation's gold reserves shifted from elected officials to an independent institution shielded from public accountability. This wasn't a simple reform. It was a silent coup. For the first time in American history, the dollar was indirectly controlled by people who didn't answer to voters. And with that change, the tug-of-war over gold began. World War I was only a year away, and global powers were already preparing to use gold to finance military expansion and economic dominance. What makes 1913 even more significant is this. The Federal Reserve's creation allowed the government to issue paper money more freely, without gold backing every dollar. That meant more wars, more spending, and more debt. The United States had taken its first steps into a world where money could be created with the stroke of a pen, and where gold quietly became the anchor of international power. This single event set the stage for every major economic shift of the next century. After the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the stage was set for a deeper transformation, one that would completely break the connection between money and reality. That transformation began in 1933, during the darkest days of the Great Depression. Banks were failing, unemployment was soaring, and ordinary Americans were terrified. But behind the panic was a deeper truth. The government needed gold, and fast. President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, making it illegal for Americans to own most forms of gold. Citizens were forced to surrender their gold coins, gold bars, and gold certificates to the government, often at unfair prices. Many didn't even understand what was happening. They simply followed orders. What the government did next reveals the real intention behind the confiscation. After collecting the nation's gold at $20.67 per ounce, the government immediately raised the price to $35 per ounce, instantly gaining billions in hidden value. This was not a rescue plan. It was a transfer of wealth from the public to the state. For the next several decades, the U.S. dollar remained pegged to gold internationally, but domestically Americans could no longer exchange dollars for gold. The final blow came in 1971, when President Richard Nixon announced the end of the gold standard entirely. With a single televised speech, he severed the dollar from gold, ending the Bretton Woods system and launching the world into an era of floating currencies backed by nothing but government promises. From that moment, money became unlimited. Nations could print endlessly. Debt exploded. Inflation became normal. What began with gold confiscation in 1933 ended with the global abandonment of honest money in 1971, and it reshaped the financial world forever. When the United States abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the world entered completely uncharted territory. For the first time in modern history, the global reserve currency, the U.S. dollar, was backed by nothing. No gold, no silver, no physical wealth, just trust. And trust alone could not hold the world economy together. So the U.S. government engineered a new system in the early 1970s, the petrodollar. It was one of the smartest, quietest geopolitical moves ever made. American officials struck a deal with Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in U.S. dollars. In return, the U.S. would provide military protection, weapons, and political support. Within a decade, every major oil-producing nation had agreed to the same arrangement. Suddenly, if any country wanted to buy oil, the lifeblood of every modern economy, they needed U.S. dollars. This created an artificial global demand for dollars, essentially replacing gold with oil as the foundation of the world monetary system. But the petrodollar system had a hidden cost. it enabled the rise of fake wealth. With no gold standard to limit printing, and with the world forced to use dollars, the U.S. and other major countries unleashed a flood of easy money. Debt spiraled. Speculation grew. Financial markets ballooned far beyond the real economy. Banks invented exotic financial products that had no intrinsic value but created trillions on paper. This illusion reached its peak in 2008, when the global financial system almost collapsed under the weight of its own fiction. The crash exposed a painful truth. For nearly 4 decades, the world had been running on a monetary system built not on gold, but on leverage, oil dependence, and financial engineering. The age of honest money had ended. The age of artificial wealth had begun. The 2008 financial crisis exposed the fragility of a global economy built on debt, fiat money, and speculation. While millions of ordinary people lost homes, savings, and jobs, a quieter, more strategic battle was being waged behind the scenes: the covert accumulation of gold by global powers. Nations like China, Russia, India, and Turkey understood that the dollar-centric financial system was fragile and vulnerable. They knew that one day, the U.S. could lose its dominance as the world's reserve currency. So they began quietly buying gold, ton by ton, through state reserves, central banks, and covert acquisitions. Unlike public markets where prices can be influenced by speculation, these nations often bought gold discreetly, keeping their purchases secret to avoid tipping off markets or alerting the U.S. and its allies. Why gold? Because it is the ultimate hedge against fiat collapse. Unlike paper currencies or bonds, gold is tangible, scarce, and universally accepted. In times of crisis, it retains value when debt and printed money do not. By amassing gold, these nations were silently preparing for a future where the dollar might no longer dictate global trade. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Western allies continued printing trillions, propping up economies, and inflating stock markets. On the surface, it looked like recovery, but underneath, global power dynamics were shifting. Countries accumulating gold quietly were positioning themselves for a post-dollar world. They were preparing to reclaim sovereignty over their economies and reduce dependence on the U.S. controlled financial system. By the end of the 2010s, this covert war for gold had set the stage for a new financial battleground, one defined not by military might, but by reserves, strategy, and foresight. The real winners would not be the countries that printed the most money, but the ones who quietly stored the most gold. As the world entered the 2020s, a new phase in the centuries-long war for gold began, one that could redefine the global monetary system. The COVID-19 pandemic, global supply chain disruptions, and unprecedented stimulus spending created the perfect storm for a monetary reset. Central banks printed trillions of dollars, euros, and yen, inflating currencies faster than at any time in history. But while governments flooded the economy with paper money, nations like China, Russia, India, and Turkey accelerated their gold acquisitions, quietly preparing for a shift that most of the world's population could barely imagine. This is not speculation. It is strategy. Gold has always been the ultimate insurance policy, and those who control it control the foundations of global wealth. As digital currencies, debt spirals, and rising inflation destabilize traditional fiat money, gold becomes the silent backbone of financial sovereignty. Countries amassing it now are positioning themselves for a world where the U.S. dollar may no longer be king. Meanwhile, central banks in the West face a dilemma: continue printing money to stimulate economies and risk hyperinflation, or slow down and watch the dollar lose influence. Every decision impacts not just markets, but geopolitics. The rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, adds another layer, linking populations directly to state-controlled digital money, while gold quietly operates outside this digital reach. A reminder that real power is tangible, scarce, and outside any one nation's control. The coming reset may not be announced. It may arrive subtly as currencies weaken, gold prices spike, and new alliances form. When it happens, the world will see a profound shift: the return of gold as the ultimate measure of wealth, and the emergence of a new global monetary order where nations that prepared quietly will hold the true power. The timeline from 1913 to 2025 reveals a pattern. Those who understand gold and a CT while the world sleeps ultimately decide the rules.